Now, as we look at German history and we apply some of the things that I've just spoken of, Germany is literally one of history's great puzzles. Throughout this class, please keep 3 key questions and some sub-questions of those questions in your mind. We're really going to be examining, and I encourage you to examine the following question. Throughout history, what was Germany? Was its struggle for identity a consequence of its centuries of fragmentation? Was Germany a concrete or an abstract expression? Was Germany fundamentally a political or a cultural linguistic unit? Was its struggle for identity related to its militarism? Was its struggle for identity related to its anti-Semitism? Fragmentation is the first thing that we need to look at because it's there under this whole entire question is, why was Germany for years so fragmented? Why did it take to about 1870, 1871 for Germany as we kind of know it to come into existence? Martin Luther perhaps said it best. He said, Germany is a beautiful, strong horse with food and everything she needs, but she lacks a rider. This shows the Holy Roman Empire, what we usually Germany was a large component of the Holy Roman Empire. So was Austria, so was Hungary. The, pieces of what are now Czechoslovakia over here, what is called Bohemia, etc. Brandenburg would have been up in the area of what later on became Prussia with a P, not Russia. And this would be German speaking. You have Württemberg down here and Baden, in the area of what, now we call really Bavaria, right? And you have the Palatinate and all of these other areas of Germany, Hesse, etc., Munster, Osnabrück. This was the bishopric of Munster, the diocese of Munster. And then you have some other places like the Netherlands that were part of the Holy Roman Empire. So while other parts of Europe were part and parcel of the Holy Roman Empire, this particularly being the United Netherlands, being the Netherlands today, the Spanish Netherlands, once a part of the Holy Roman Empire, is really what is now Belgium, etc. Nonetheless, Germany was a good portion of this, and German-speaking people of many different dialects composed much of the Holy Roman Empire in 1648. Well, as you can see, it was vastly fragmented. And actually this does not show all of the hundreds of division. There literally would have been about 300 or so different principalities, dioceses, archdioceses, electorates, margraves, etc. Call them what you want. They were all internally, that is domestically self-governing. And their kind of foreign policy was handled by the Holy Roman Emperor, who was elected by the 7 great electors of the empire. Again, I'm sorry, here's Bavaria over here. I misspoke. Baden and Württemberg are where my own relatives on my mother's side are from, and some of them are from Bavaria too. Sorry for misspeaking. And so you can see that Germany was very fragmented in 1648. And if you know something about European history in France and in England, those places were becoming unified and they were becoming real nations. And here the Holy Roman Empire was in 1648 after the end of the 30 Years' War, and it's fragmented as ever. In fact, it kind of looks like the Middle Ages just didn't end and the fragmentation of the Middle Ages continue. Literally, kind of Germany was a political dinosaur, a political backwater for the 17th century. There was also a religious significance of the 30 Years' War and the Peace of Westphalia of 1648, in that only 3 religions were acceptable in Germany: Roman Catholicism, Lutheranism, also called evangelical, and the Reformed religion, which was Calvinistic. And so this fragmented Germany further, because if you were in a Roman Catholic realm, you know, that is the bishop there, the archbishop, the prince, the margrave, whoever, the elector, if he were Roman Catholic, then really, if you were Protestant, you made the sensible decision of getting up and moving to a Protestant province. If, on the other hand, you were in a Protestant province and you wanted to practice Roman Catholicism, then you got up and moved to a Roman Catholic province. So there was a great deal of migration after the 30 Years' War, which was a religious war, and the Peace of Westphalia, which further fragmented Germany. So Germany was not only fragmented governmentally into all these principalities, it was also fragmented in terms of religion. In Europe in 1815, you can see that things were still fragmented for Germany. Napoleon created the Confederation of the Rhine in 1806 when the Holy Roman Empire was officially ended. 1815, the Congress of Vienna, German Confederation was established, and by 1817 it included 77 different divisions. All of them can't be shown here because of the scale of the map. But you were clearly seeing certain divisions emerging, like the Austrian Empire, ruled by the Habsburgs, Prussia up here, which we'll be talking about, and Hanover and Bavaria and Württemberg and Baden and Saxony and etc., and 70-some other ones as well. So by as late as 1815, look at how the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland are together. The Kingdom of Norway and Sweden together. The Russian Empire together. The Kingdom of Spain together. The Kingdom of France together. Ottoman Empire together. And then you have a mess still down here before the unification of Italy, because again of the breakup of the Holy Roman Empire, and a mess up here in the area of Germany because of the breakup of the Holy Roman Empire. Still fragmented. Now, another question that's going to arise directly off of our explanation of this is, did the Holy Roman Empire of the Habsburg family, and the Holy Roman Empire was literally the First Reich, okay? We're going to look at the Second Reich of Bismarck, you know, at the unification of Germany in 1871, and then there's going to be, of course, the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler. So did the Holy Roman Empire of the Habsburgs, the First Reich, set Germany on an imperial course rather than a national one? And did this imperial course engender, that is, bring about, cause unnecessary wars and entangling alliances? That is, did it lead to the militarism that German history was punctuated by? Well, let's first discuss a little bit the Habsburg family and the Holy Roman Empire and how this became an imperial empire very quickly under the Habsburg dynasty. Just as a little anecdote, we like to talk about some things that are interesting, hopefully, in this class. The Habsburg men suffered from the Habsburg jaw, which was a prognathism, that is where the lower jaw outgrows the upper jaw and therefore it juts out, as you can literally see in this illustration of Ferdinand, brother of Charles V. It was true of the great Emperor Charles V. His mouth hung open. He had a speech impediment. It was true of Charles II of Spain, where it was so bad that he was unable to chew. The Habsburg men actually liked to grow beards to kind of hide this whole jaw. Well, let's discuss how the Habsburg Empire, intersects with German history and really draws the Germans into a much larger, it had been for years before Charles V, please don't get me wrong, it had already been drawing it into imperial enterprises, but the so-called world of Charles V just made it worse. You might remember that there was a king and a queen who got together and married, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castilla, and they really kind of helped form what becomes the nation of Spain. They're the ones that financed the voyage of Christopher Columbus. Now, they had a daughter, Joanna the Mad. She wasn't wired all right upstairs in terms of her brain, and I'm certain people didn't run around calling her to her face Joanna the Mad, but she had some mental challenges. Maximilian I had been Habsburg dynasty, of the Habsburg dynasty, was already Holy Roman Emperor, and he married Mary of Burgundy, and they had a son called Philip. So when Philip married Joanna the Mad, they had a child called Charles, who would become Charles V of the Habsburg dynasty. Now, he not only becomes Habsburg Emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, but he inherited from this side of the family Spain, the Spanish New World possessions in America, Sicily and Naples, Corsica and Sardinia, over here, the Burgundian lands, Austria, etc. He became literally the most powerful emperor in the world at that time, and one of the most powerful in history, if not the most powerful in history. It's going across 2 continents, and it's bringing into the Habsburg family all of the wealth of the Spanish New World possessions in America, particularly Central and South America. And there he was. This is a famous portrait by the artist Titian of Charles V, who ruled as Holy Roman Emperor from 1519 to 1556. And some more interesting things about him. There were 7 great electors of the Holy Roman Empire. In the imperial election of the Holy Roman Emperor in 1519, when the prior emperor had died, so they needed a new election, Charles V brought more votes than Francis I of France, of the so-called Valois dynasty of France. Hence, he became Holy Roman Emperor in 1519. He married Isabella of Portugal, thereby further cementing the Habsburgs' relationship to Portugal. And Charles V's brother Ferdinand married Anne, the sister of King Louis II of Hungary and Bohemia, thereby bringing eventually Hungary and Bohemia into the Habsburg realms. Charles V's sister, Mary, this is all marriage politics, married King Louis II of Hungary and Bohemia. So now you have a second cementing of the relationship with Hungary and Bohemia. So not surprisingly, in 1526, the Habsburgs came to control Hungary and Bohemia. The world of Charles V was huge. These lands here in this camel color are lands inherited by Charles V all over. Lands gained by Charles V include all of these in yellow. The enemies of Charles V included those in blue. And he was kind of wedged between 2 enemies, one on the west, France, one on the east, the Ottoman Empire, and then this growing empire of Prussia, which used to be called before that Brandenburg. So a huge empire, and you can see how this, distracts Germany and distracts the Holy Roman Empire into more imperial ventures. And then you look at the giant empire of Spain, which included, all of this, but not Brazil, which was, of course, Portuguese. But then he was even related to the Portuguese. He had married into that family. So it's a vast empire. Now you may say, but Dr. Tenkate, when Charles V died, the empire gets split up between his brother Ferdinand and between his son Philip II, and the Spanish part floats off into Philip II's hand, his son's hand. That is very true, but for a long time afterward, when either the one kind of German, the Austrian side of the family would get in wars, they would drag in the Spanish side, and when the Spanish side would get in wars, they would drag in the German-Austrian side. So the politics still became very imperialistic, and that really kind of distracted them from doing things. So What does Germany look like today? I just showed you some, maps of Germany during the Holy Roman Empire. If you want copyright-free maps of Germany, in fact, if you want to look at German history as you read your books, go to this Wikimedia Commons site. It's excellent, and it has dozens of maps of Germany over time. For detailed geological maps, you can go here. For detailed climate maps, you can go there. Just basically, Germany today is surrounded by 9 nations: the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, Switzerland, Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland, and Denmark. The province of Schleswig-Holstein in Germany goes up here into part of what is generally called the Jutland Peninsula. So Denmark's there. The peninsula divides the North Sea from the Baltic Sea. So you've got the North Sea, the Baltic Sea, divided by the Jutland Peninsula. Germany has almost 81 million people, the second largest population in Europe, 81, 82 million, right around there. Only the European area of Russia is larger. It's about 357,000 square kilometers in size, so it's much, much smaller if we contrast it to the U.S. at 9.8 million square kilometers. And its climate, for the most part, is a temperate climate. There's a winter and spring and a summer. There's distinct seasons. There's no real extremes in precipitation. Precipitation occurs pretty well all year round. If we look at the landforms of Germany, and this will also help us understand how things happen historically, it's really divided into 4 major sections. The North German Plain is seen here, Norddeutsches Tiefland, the Central Uplands, the Mittelgebirge, the Alpenvorland, or the Alpine Foreland, also called the Bavarian Foreland or the Bavarian Plateau, down here in the area, of course, Bavaria, and then the Alp Mountains themselves, which are some of the tallest in the world. So you generally have up here in the area of the North Sea and the Baltic Sea some very low-lying land. In fact, some of this was former marshland that was reclaimed by building dikes. And the maintenance of these dikes and levees, of course, just as in the case of the neighboring Netherlands, is very important. So this is a part of a big, giant European plain which runs all the way across Europe from France all the way up into Russia. It tends to be a very agriculturally rich area. And then as you go southward, the land begins to be uplifted into hills and to mountains. Germany is blessed in terms of transportation, and this would have been very important historically, but also it's important even today, into many, many rivers. So the famous Rhine River down here near the Black Forest, the Neckar River, the Main River, the Mosel and Lahn rivers, the Ruhr River Valley, the Ruhr, the Ems, the Weser, even the Elbe, they're all flowing into the North Sea. And then you have over here the Oder River and the Neckar River, which are forming, borders with, say, for instance, up here, Poland, and they're flowing into the Oder River flows into the Baltic Sea. Another very important river, which of course will continue on into Austria and Hungary, is the Donau River, or what we call the Danube River, here in the south. Now, a third key question. Does modern Germany's blend of communalism and individualism explain the development and sustainability of its post-World War II economic miracle? And a sub-question, does this blend explain its multi-party coalition governmental structure? Generally, this is a chart that I put together. Societies tend to fit somewhere on this continuum. For instance, the United States, really on the continuum, is over here under individualism. We place great importance, not only our government, but our society, on the individual and on individual decision making. and we have a kind of majority rules culture. Over here, you have places like China and Korea and Southeast Asia and Japan. They're communalism. Instead of the group being important, instead of the individual being important, the group is important. Decision making is generally group decision making, and rather than majority rules, harmony, consensus, compromise are all very important. I want you to kind of, as you read and as you explore German history and Germany today, try to see where Germany fits on this continuum. It doesn't fit over here like China and Japan, and it doesn't fit over here with the United States. I'll give you a hint, it's probably fitting in as a blend of these two. There are dangers to each of these. A danger of too much communalism is the individual can be ignored. A danger of too much individualism is there can be selfishness, greed, gridlock in government and in making decisions, etc. Now, to understand this communalism in this sense of where Germany is, we need to look at just quickly three economic systems. One is a subsistence economy. So medieval Germany, pre-modern Germany, Germany before the Industrial Revolution, was an example of a subsistence economy, where farmers grew what they needed. If they had a little bit more left over, they made it into goods, which they might trade, with neighboring provinces, principalities, etc. Not much in terms of trade, certainly not much in terms of worldwide trade. A commercial or free market economy is like what the United States has and what Europe has today, what Germany has, but we're going to become more specific about this in a minute. A planned economy is like the old Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc communist nations of Europe, including old East Germany. So again, very important in this lecture for me to underscore that we're looking at three different types of economies for those of you interested in economics or coming from a more science background. We're going to see evidences of all three of these in Germany and in German history. Now, lest we err on saying something that will seem ignorant, I want to stress where we're kind of at in the economic terminology. Because too easy, sometimes people say, Germany and the Netherlands and Sweden and Finland and all, they're just socialist countries. They are not socialist countries. We need to be very careful of our terminology, there's a difference between apples and oranges. So we need definitions in order to discuss anything, and especially to debate topics. Capitalism, and I still think this is a very good definition from an economics textbook from the 1980s, but it still holds true today, is an economy in which the factors of production, land, capital, etc., are owned by individuals. The basic allocation decisions are made by market forces, and we usually simplify those to say supply and demand. A social market economy or social capitalism is where much of Germany and many of the nations, where Germany today is and where many of the nations of Europe are. It's capitalism, but whereby the government provides very generous social benefits. It is not a socialist market economy, which has some market mechanisms plus some socialism. So again, Germany is a social market economy or social capitalism. It is not a socialist market economy, and it is not socialism. Socialism is an economy in which all non-labor means of production are owned by the state, which exercises control over resource allocation. And communism, according to Karl Marx, would be where the government would cease to exist because everyone would be equal. So if we put this on another continuum, we would say that communism would have included utopian communities like the Shakers in the United States. Socialism would have been the old Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, the Soviet Union. It also would have been the old East Germany. Socialist market economy, where you got a mixture of things, would be like today's People's Republic of China. Social market economy, Germany, much of today's Europe. Capitalism, today, the US, somewhere over here on capitalism, because, you know, ever since the New Deal of the 1930s, we have, you know, things like Social Security and Medicare and so forth. So we have some social benefits. In the 19th century, it would have been further over here on the right, the US. So more specifically, Germany today is an example of a social market economy, the belief that a free market should also serve broader social goals. And this social market economy of Germany was a product, pardon the pun, or an outgrowth of the post-World War II period or economy. And especially was the influence of Ludwig Erhard, who was Minister of Economics in Germany and the West Germany from 1949 to 1963, under the West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer. Konrad Adenauer was actually the next chancellor after him was Ludwig Erhard. Another part of this kind of economy is, and of this post-war period and of Erhard and others, was co-determination. And that really consists of two things. In Germany today, corporations and places, workplaces have elected workers which hold positions on corporate boards. So if we were to take an example of P&G in the United States, workers at P&G would actually you know, so a large company like Mercedes-Benz would have workers that would elect other workers, and they would hold positions on the Mercedes-Benz corporate board. Imagine something like that in the United States, like, you know, our big P&Gs or any other places. There would also be work councils in places of employment, so each factory and office, etc., would have these to help, and they would elect their own representatives, and they would help management in making a whole range of decisions. It might be budget decisions, wages, layoffs, technology, mergers. Everything is really a possibility. So again, as we kind of look at perceptions, and realities, this enables the German economy to be fairly flexible, and because it has the perceptions and the reality oftentimes are very interrelated. They're not far from one another. The workers may see things in a certain way, and they help the management and the leaders, the CEOs, see their perspective, and the CEOs and managers help let the workers see their perspective, so this kind of co-determination can take place and decisions can be made together. It doesn't necessarily mean that decisions are made rapidly, but that the decisions are something that most people can live with. Germany's social market economy invests in all of its socioeconomic classes, including the middle class, providing health care, sick leave, pensions, college education, which, although there is some charge for tuition in Germany, you know, some places are charging like, you know, $600 or so for college tuition. It's very affordable. Affordable housing, parental leave, childcare, kiddie stipend. So after you have children, you get a stipend for a certain number of years for each child, and paid vacations. And really, most Germans have, you know, anywhere up to about 6 weeks of vacations time. And yet German workers are still very productive. So they have a lot of vacation time. They vacation hard, they party hard, but they also work very hard. Today, Germany is one of the wealthiest nations in the world, typically running a current account balance. Current account balance is what we look at more and more in international economics. It's a trade balance plus it includes services and investments. So it tells us more than a trade balance. So anyhow, Germany's current account balance, typically vies with China for the largest in the world. If you look at a magazine like The Economist that traces it on a week-to-week basis, sometimes China has the largest account balance running that week, and sometimes Germany does, but it's always those two going back and forth. Now, considering that China has almost 1.4 billion people and Germany only about 81, 82 million people, Germany's current account balance is even more phenomenal. Germany is also a member of the so-called Group of Seven, and Germany's government is also a kind of interesting communal sort of government. It's an example of a cabinet government or a parliamentary government. For kind of the model of responsible government, a parliamentary government, a cabinet government, you probably think of the Prime Minister of Great Britain and the Parliament of Great Britain. And there, the people do not vote directly for the Prime Minister or Chancellor as we Americans vote for the President. The Prime Minister or Chancellor appoints ministers who with him or her compose the cabinet. The cabinet determines policies and legislation to be presented to the Parliamentary Assembly, carries out the acts, and coordinates and directs the various departments of government. Responsible government includes both collective and individual responsibility. The cabinet is supposed to stand united on policy issues. If a cabinet member disagrees with his colleagues, his proper course of action is to resign. That's called individual ministerial responsibility. In turn, a cabinet and its assembly can be dissolved before the scheduled time for re-election and new elections called. That's called collective ministerial responsibility and could include a vote of no confidence in that parliament. Now, Germany does have a parliamentary form of government. And one other thing that we need to look at is its forms of electoral districts. So constituency is an electoral district. In the United States, we typically have single-member district plurality systems. That's what they're called. Okay, so for instance, you live in a particular U.S. House of Representatives district. I live in the 4th U.S. House District of Kentucky. So when we go to elect a new member every 2 years of the U.S. House of Representatives in the 4th District, typically there's a Democrat running and a Republican running, and whoever wins is, quote unquote, the one that gets the plurality of votes, the first past the post, literally. And what that means is if there were 3 people running, say an independent and a Democrat and a Republican, you wouldn't necessarily need to get a majority of votes. You would just need to get a plurality of votes. That is the most number of votes. You would need to be like in a horse race, first past the post. Proportional representation, or PR, is a democratic parliamentary election system with multi-member districts. Seats in Parliament are allocated to parties according to the proportion of the popular vote within each district. So an example of this is if Party A receives 40% of the vote, and there are 5 seats in that district, 40% of 5 would be 2. 2 of the seats would go to candidates on Party A's slate. The remaining seats would go to the other parties in rough proportion to the votes they receive. So a parliamentary system has more voices. So, in proportional representation, you do not necessarily need a plurality of votes. You're not going to necessarily have a plurality of votes. Maybe one party is only getting 8% of the votes, but it's going to get generally 8% of the seats or a certain percentage of the seats. So it might mean that you need a certain percentage to get 1 seat if there are 5 seats. You understand what I mean? Or you could, if you're a small party that's only getting maybe 5% of the votes, form a coalition with another party which only got a certain amount of votes and then gain a seat. Mixed member proportional representation is what Germany largely sees, and that where voters cast 2 votes, one for a constituency representative and the second for a party. And that takes into account proportional representation and overhang seats in a very complicated formula. And I don't even want to go into that formula or overhang seats because now is not the time. It's just very confusing. So let's put the U.S., and this is my simplified chart, Dr. Tenkati's simplified chart of the legislatures of the U.S. and Germany. Type of government, U.S. presidential, Germany parliamentary. It has a chancellor who's the leader. The leader, U.S., Barack Obama. Angela Merkel of the CDU party, the Christian Democratic Union, since 2005. This is Germany since the 2013 elections. So she was reelected in 2013 by the assembly. It's a coalition government of CDU, CSU, and SPD. Political parties in the United States, Democrat and Republican. Many, many political parties because of proportional representation here in Germany. It's a bicameral legislature in Germany as well. The upper house is the Senate. It has 100 seats, 50 from each state. It's a bicameral, so the upper house is called the Bundesrat. There's 69 members. Those are appointed by the 16 states or Landtags of Germany. The House of Representatives is the lower house, 435 plus one non-voting representative from the District of Columbia. The Bundestag has 631, but that number varies from election to election. You know, it could be one or two more or less, depending upon so-called overhang votes, which are a complex system. Terms of office, Senate, 6 years. Bundesrat, variable, dependent upon state elections every 4 years. House, every 2 years. Bundestag, every 4 years. Single-member districts or multi-member districts. The Senate is neither of those. The Bundesrat, not applicable either because it's appointed by the 16 states. In the United States, the House has 435 members in single-member districts. The Bundestag, the lower house in Germany, is about half of the members are in single-seat districts, constituencies, and that is the first of 2 votes, and about half are stateless or second vote of a proportional representation, see below. Proportional representation, we do not have that in the United States at the federal level. Some cities and so forth have it. The Bundestag, again, appointed, not applicable. The Bundestag, about half and half. A party must have 5% of the national vote, or at least 3 districts, to have representation in the Bundestag. You can see how this is more of a combination of individualism and communalism than the United States system is. Any questions, please feel free to email or phone me. I'm always happy to help. And